This episode of Now This Is Lit is brought to you by Audible. Check the link in the description to get your first Star Wars audiobook free. Everyone loves free things. Click that link. Do it. This show is also brought to you by our patrons. If you want to support the show in a different way, with just $1 a month, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. You can get a sticker. You can get access to an exclusive show that we do every month that's wild and chaotic and fun and something you can only get by becoming a member of the Patreon. There'll be so many more perks very, very soon. But for now, do you want a sticker? Do you want a sticker that has a Now This Is Lit logo? Because it's fantastic and I love them. But I also want to give them away because there's just a stack of stickers on my desk. So if you want one, $1 a month. Patreon.com/StarWarsLitPod. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. You're listening to Now This Is Lit, a podcast about Star Wars books, the people who make them, and the readers who just can't get enough of them. I'm your host, Meg Dowell. I use she, her pronouns. The High Republic is coming to an end in just a few months, and I thought it would be a good time to sort of go back and look at some of the parts of this series that have been most significant, most meaningful. Today, this week on the show, Brad from our Patreon joins me to talk about the first wave of the High Republic, Light of the Jedi, A Test of Courage, Into the Dark, the foundations that the rest of the series has been built on. These are very important books, and we love them very much. And I hope that you enjoy this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. The thing about like the High Republic and just the amount of books that there are is like it's not even the books that you get when they come out. At least in the beginning, they were also doing all these like special editions. And while they're beautiful, do we have room for all of these is the question I want to ask, because there's too many and it's not even over yet.
I don't have room. I just don't. I've built bookshelves because I thought that would look cool. But now I'm at the point where like I'm not actually a woodworker and I need more space. You talk about the special editions. I got hooked on the Inkstone book editions.
Yep.
Which they're not the ones who did the High Republic editions.
No.
That would be Goldsboro books. And I remember looking at the Goldsboro Light of the Jedi and thinking, oh, yeah, that's cool. I'll just get, the usual one. And if only I knew how hard I was going to fall for the High Republic, I would have snapped that thing up.
Yeah.
It would have been more expensive, but I would have got every special edition I could get my hands on.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, if you're a collector, if you're a Star Wars book collector, if you're like, even if you're just like a High Republic book collector, it just never stops. And like, it's an investment, but it's like, I think they're pretty and I like taking pictures of them, like, it makes me happy.
I actually got the Inkstone edition of The Mask of Fear.
Oh, yes.
I opened it 10 minutes ago.
Oh, I'm still waiting on mine. Mine's delayed.
So was mine. And then all of a sudden I got a delivery coming today and it's gorgeous.
I can't wait. I've seen people are starting to post pictures because they're getting them. And I'm like, I need this in my hands.
I somehow had managed not to see what the gold foil was.
Oh.
So I got to unbox it and then slide the dust jacket off and just be blown away. It's so beautiful. They do such a good job.
They really do. I'm so glad.
I really should have got the Light of the Jedi one.
Oh, yeah. I just like, I don't, it's like, it's another way to celebrate Star Wars books or just books in general. And I just think it's so special. And like, they do a really, really good job. And like, I'm glad that they're also doing like just random like Essential Legends hardcover releases too, because I'm like, do I need this? Do I already have 2 or 3 copies of this book? Maybe. Am I going to get this one too? Absolutely 100%.
Yeah, they announced the Darth Plagueis one, and like, there's no way I was ever gonna miss out on getting that one. Especially now that I'm hooked and they've got me. So
Yeah. Yeah, once
that
they get
one,
you. Yeah.
yeah, that one and the Dawn of the Jedi one is I think the best gold foil one. It's just that logo they have on there looks so cool.
It really does. It really does. I'm gonna have to post a photo of it to go along with this episode because if you've not seen it, it's worth looking at. It's worth getting if you can.
It is. If you haven't seen it and you're just listening to us talk about it on an audio forum, that's going to be wonderful for you.
uh,
Uh,
uh, yeah, it's sometimes it's hard to talk about books because I'm like, oh, this cover is really cool, and then I'm like, well, they're not looking at it with me. Maybe we'll do video at some point. I don't know.
that's a tough pivot, though.
I know. I've thought about doing it, and I'm like, maybe later. Um, I am so glad that you are here tonight to talk with me about a small yet very significant piece of the High Republic. Just for some background for anyone listening, when we were trying to set, and I'll let you I'll let you introduce yourself and talk about yourself in a minute. But when we were setting this up, um, we were like, let's talk about like the first phase or the first wave of the High Republic. And like I'm looking at it, and I'm like, it seems like so much has happened since then. But also, like, if you just look at Light of the Jedi, A Test of Courage, and Into the Dark, which is what we're mainly going to be talking about today, I think. We'll see if we go beyond that. But you just look at those three books, and they're so foundational and important. And I forgot like how much happens just in these first three books of the initiative, and um, so much happens after that. And I wish we could talk about everything again on the show because the show obviously started after the High Republic started. We'll see if that happens. But we're gonna start with just a little piece. If you need a refresher, because the High Republic is coming to an end soon, and maybe we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But if you need a refresher, let's go back. I thought to the very beginning because even I was like, I need to refresh my memory on some of the things that have happened because it's been a while since I read these. So we're doing that. But why don't we start by talking about you first because you were so kind to agree to come onto the show. So tell the listeners, tell everyone. Not that many people listen, it's fine. Tell us about you, about your Star Wars journey, how you got into the books, and then we'll talk about the High Republic.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like we had a great cold open where everyone gets to hear my voice and has no idea what is going on or who's here. I'm sure you'll
But
put
it's a
an intro.
mystery. It's a
It's a
mystery. Yes,
mystery.
I will.
All
I
right.
will put an intro. But also,
Oh,
if
well,
they don't
yes.
listen to the
Okay.
intro, it's a mystery, and then they figure out who you are. Who are you? Talk to me.
Okay, so hello everyone. So my name is Brad. I use he, him pronouns, and ooh, I have been into Star Wars as long as I can remember. Um, I'm the oldest of my siblings, so it's not like I had an older sibling trying to get me into it, and I kind of fall in a weird category where I was born in the early 90s. I was the perfect age for the Phantom Menace. And my parents were incredibly strict.
Mm,
I could only watch like Disney rated G movies for the
mm,
longest time. My youngest brother, by the time he was, 8 years old, he could watch whatever he wanted. Good for him. Um, so all of my friends were all locked into Star Wars, and Star Wars was great. And I actually knew a lot of the story of the prequels because, those were coming out from my friends telling me.
mm,
And as a kid, I loved Lego so much. And so my favorite set that I had was Luke's X-Wing. And I actually, I don't still have the original one I had then, but I did get a set off of eBay for like $20 and they go for a lot more than that. So I don't know what this person was thinking. So I have it sitting behind me. So I like that was my entry point into Star Wars was Legos. until finally my parents said, okay, fine, you love this thing you haven't even seen yet. We'll let you watch them. So I watched the first six movies in release order at the age of like 12.
Mm.
So I got to be like an original trilogy kid and a prequel trilogy kid. I like how that played out for me
Yeah.
because I feel one is I then rolled right into Legends. I got
Hmm.
really into the books, and a lot of that, a lot of those who really loved that seem to be more of the original trilogy, what is this prequel stuff? But at the same time, I loved the prequels. I've loved the sequels. I love the High Republic, a lot of the stuff that's come in the Disney era as well. Um, so, but back to me as at 12, we went on vacation. I should have looked it up before we got on here to Lake Placid, New York. And I remember what the bookstore looks like. I don't remember what it's called, but I had just seen the movies. We're out on vacation, and my parents say you can get a book. So I go in and I find a Star Wars book, and it says it's number one, except it was, I actually have the copy sitting in front of me. I've held on to it. The New Jedi Order, Dark Tide 1 Onslaught,
Oh
which is not the
no.
first book in the New Jedi Order. Uh, so my entry point was almost like, I mean, the New Jedi Order, there's a lot of similarities between that and the High Republic. You have this
Yeah.
multi-author, massive series. It was just novels. I mean, there were some comics, but it wasn't nearly as crossover as
Yeah.
the High Republic was. But yes, my first Star Wars book was book two of the New Jedi Order, in which I
Uh,
found out that the thing that happens at the end of book one, that anybody who's read that knows, anybody who hasn't read that, I won't spoil. I found that out in the aftermath.
no.
Yeah, that was my intro to Star Wars books, and somehow I still got hooked. Somehow, um, then I got to high school, and it wasn't cool, and I kind of ignored it for a while. I actually just listened to Meg's episode, "The Star Wars Books That Shaped Us," like last week. Um, I think that episode's like a year and a half old, so I'm not sure. Podcast feeds are great, but then timeline gets weird. So if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it. It was wonderful. Um, but Meg, you were talking about like circling back around to, wait, I love this thing, and I've kind of ignored it because like I didn't think it was cool, or maybe not exactly that, but that's what it was for me. It's not cool. I'm ignoring it. And I finally got back to, okay, this is something I love. Why am I, doing the high school thing? So by the time I was in like my maybe mid 20s, I was like, I'm back full into this. This is my fandom. I love this so much. Like, let's go. And then the High Republic started, and all the other, and I'm lost. I'm so far down the rabbit hole.
And you'll never get out. It's
I will
fine.
never get out, and I am okay with that. My reading list is several years long. I do plan on rereading The New Jedi Order, but I've been planning
Ugh,
on that for like 3 years now, and I haven't started.
it's
So,
very intimidating. Um, there's many books.
but wonderful books. Like I can't get enough of it. I need to find a way to make this my full-time job.
That's the dream. It's the
Uh,
dream. Can we
it
just
really
like
is.
read Star Wars books all day? I wish. Um, yeah, when you were before I remember because you told me this already, before I remembered that you just listened to that episode, you were talking about um your Star Wars book journey, and I was like, hey, that's very similar to me. Where I think we're probably based on what you said around the same age, and like when the Phantom Menace came out, I pretty much experienced that through my younger brother because he was like the target audience. 'Cause he's a little bit younger than I am, and I wish. I wish that I had that experience of like being on the playground and like listening to like all my friends talk about Star Wars. I didn't have that experience, but like I imagine like because whenever a new Star Wars movie comes out now, the first thing I think of is all the kids who saw this weekend are gonna go back to school on Monday and just only talk about Star Wars, and I think that's so fun. Um,
Yeah.
but I also think it's so interesting that like so many of us had. if we got into like Star Wars and Star Wars books when we were kids, had this moment of like getting older and like questioning like, is Star Wars really the thing that I want to spend all my time on? Um, and you and I had that time of like, oh, I'm just gonna like go do other things and pretend like I don't care about it. And then that glorious moment when you come back to it and you never look back. I love it. And I think I love Star Wars books even more because I almost didn't get back into them. And I think sometimes I'm like, what would my literally what would my life be like right now if I had never picked up Ahsoka? Yeah, if you haven't listened to that episode, it's supposed to be a series, but again, like you said, that was a year and a half ago. We'll see. We'll see. But Star Wars books just have a huge impact on people, and that's why I liked starting with um, how a guest got into them and how they feel about
Yeah.
them now, because they matter so much. No matter how
Yes,
old you are, no matter when
they
you got into them.
matter so
Yes,
much.
they
I mean,
do.
stories matter so
Yeah.
much. One of the things that really got me kind of falling down the fantasy, sci-fi, adventure, and eventually Star Wars really became the central point was Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that thinking like, oh, this is a philosophy book that, I'm being like pretentious in my early 20s. And instead, I'm like, oh, this is all the stuff I loved as a kid. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is why those things resonate so much.
Yeah.
Like this, because it's mirroring some of the things I was going through personally then
Yeah.
was me going through some of those stages of the hero's journey of I need to grow. I'm stuck. I'm running away from what I need to be doing in my life. And I mean, that's why folk tales exist. That's why, all of these stories that carry meaning. And then from there, I've gone on to things like the heroine's journey. Uh, Man, wow, lost my train of thought there. Sorry. I've gone on to things like, yeah, the heroine's journey. And then if you've ever listened to the What the Force podcast, Marie Claire is
Mm-hmm.
just a master at talking about that mythic literature
Yes.
and that viewpoint of like, this is why it really can resonate with you and like really hit you in the gut on
Yeah.
things that mean something to you over space wizards with laser swords? Like, why have I cried at some of these things?
Yeah,
Because they mirror our lives so well.
I do. It's my family doesn't really understand what I do. They're like, "Oh, you talk about Star Wars books, you talk to Star Wars authors." And they're like, "Oh, that's just kind of like, a very nerdy thing," and we move on. But like so often I wish I could kind of say like, "Can you pick up this book and read it and see all of the places where you will find yourself in it?" And the thing about books is like it doesn't matter if it's Star Wars, if it's Marvel, whatever it is. Like stories are universal for a reason, and just because they're set in some faraway galaxy doesn't mean we can't relate to them. And like reading can be escapism, but can also be an opportunity for self-reflection. And
Yeah.
I think both are extremely valid. And you might do both. You might do one, and then you might do the other, depending on what you're going through in your life or what's happening in the world. And pretty much the reason I'm doing this show, or one of a few reasons, is because I just like talking about stories that matter, and the stories that matter to me, and the stories that matter to the people in my life. So I'm so glad you're here.
Me too. This is, again, we're supposed to be talking about the High Republic in particular, but like, how do you even start that without going big picture? Like, this is why people have latched onto it so much. This is why they can put so many authors on the same project and let all these ideas flow because there's already so much richness in
Yeah,
Star Wars for that kind of like mythic storytelling, that kind of stuff that really grabs you like right in the soul. Like let's get dramatic about it. It grabs your soul.
it
And
does.
then and Charles' soul then steps in with with this incredible first book that goes, okay, like you have all this richness, but like let's do something new with it.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it was so familiar. Like it was such a cool way to step into a whole new project where at the same time, like it's Star Wars. It's always going to feel like Star Wars. There's some like base things that are always going to be there, even if we're in a different time period with different characters.
Yeah. I don't remember if I've said this on the show at any point, I probably have. But the thing that happened to me when I read Light of the Jedi, because, I'd read tons of Star Wars books before this, canon, legends, comics, anything. Not everything, because that's a lot, but a lot of things. And I was kind of just expecting like, oh, like this is going to be new, but it's going to be, it's going to be a Star Wars book. And I was reading Light of the Jedi, and I had this moment of like, I can't put my finger on why, but this feels like this is Star Wars to me. This story that we're reading, like it's set in a different time, different things are happening, but something about the formula that we are following, something about the writing, something about the setting is like this is what Star Wars is supposed to be. And what they've done with that since then, and even in the book itself, is they've taken that, like this is Star Wars, and really given it new meaning and new life, and like to the point where there are Star Wars fans and Star Wars book fans who are that because of the High Republic. They didn't read Star Wars books or hadn't read Star Wars books in a long time before the High Republic, before they were like, oh, like this is what Star Wars books are. Um, and that's why I can't stop talking about the High Republic, because I'm like, I really hope that these authors understand what they have done, like the magnitude of impact that, and I put that at the end, but like we'll talk about it now. The impact that this entire series has had on the fandom and Star Wars as a whole is just um when when it's all over and we all have time to, you know, process what Charles Soule has done to us again at the end, and we start reflecting on this series as a whole once it's done, I think it's going to become even more apparent that like I don't like they might do things similar to this in the future, or they might do other series, but nothing will be quite like this ever again. And I think there's something really special about that.
When you said, I hope they know what they've done, I love how that's both like, I hope they understand the magnitude of how much this was beautiful for so many readers. And I hope they understand what pain they put us through. Like, go to your room and think about what you did, Claudia Gray.
I am so scared for Trials of the Jedi because
Oh,
like
no. No.
I we have a couple more books to go until we get there, but um I don't know what to expect, because like that's gonna be the end. And I don't think they're gonna hold back. And I'm legitimately afraid. Like it might, if once I get my copy of it, I might sit on it for a couple of days before I'm like brave enough to dive into it, because I don't know. I don't know who's gonna make it out of this. I'm scared.
And even who does make it out, like what is going to happen to them?
Yeah.
Because we're also looking at the rigid, dogmatic Jedi Order of the Phantom Menace, and we know that's coming.
Hmm.
We know that the seeds of this war, this
Mm.
fight against the Nile, are what start to cue up some of the militaristic, the rigidity, when the Guardian protocols, when we first learned about that, and I'm jumping way ahead to phase three, but when we start seeing, oh, they're transforming into a warrior order again.
Yeah.
We've got hints that they were that in the old Sith Wars, the Mandalorian Wars. We don't know a lot of what that looks like in canon in the Disney era yet, but they weren't that. Like we got this shining example of they were peacekeepers. They were helping build things. Like the whole idea of the great works, where you've
Mm.
got this incredible society that is saying what we're going to pour money into is not war, is not conquest, is not domination, but is connection. Like Starlight Beacon was this massive project that was solely about how do we connect to more cultures, to more worlds.
Mm.
And like that's the shining example that I want to see. And I was so excited. And it's so heartbreaking that they got that
Mm.
close. And that's when things started to slide.
Yeah, and you even see like kind of like more like of the heartbreaking aftermath of that in The Living Force, when the whole premise is all these High Republic outposts are shutting down and they're going to shut down this other one. And they go to this world and they find out like they pretty much resent the Jedi because the Jedi left. And it used to be in the High Republic, like the Jedi were everywhere they could be. They tried to reach as many people as they could. And, by the time we get to the Phantom Menace, they're all just on Coruscant in the temple. They might go out on missions, but then they just come right back to home base. And it's not the same. And like to start the High Republic and see, they're out on the frontier, they're helping who they can, they're trying to do, what Jedi do at this point, and to see that all crumble, I can't. Like the question at the beginning of all this was, well, how do the Jedi go from where we see them now to where we know they're going to end up? And as the series has gone on, we've gotten more and more hints of like, oh, this is how they get there. It's so well done, but also so devastating.
It's it hurts.
It
I,
does.
I think I opened Light of the Jedi and I remembered how it started, but I
Mhm.
reread the first chapter,
Ugh.
or at least I skimmed it quickly.
Mm.
I shared this with Meg before we started recording, but I have a 2-year-old, so my reading time has been a little bit less as of late. So, but I wanted to make sure I touched on that again because I remember, it's 2021. This whole project got delayed. I had actually moved um, to an entirely new state, my wife and I, January of 2020. And
Oh.
then COVID happened and lockdown happened. And, we were a year into, we're living in this new place. I did have family in the area, so that was good. But I hadn't had the chance to really like find friends and community the same way. And then this this book comes out that's going to be the first of this big series, and it really gave me something to latch on to. And I think in that like first year of COVID, it was that for a lot of people of like there's this thing that I can connect to. A lot of us are inside, a lot of us are reading. There's a lot of online community that was starting to form around that kind of thing.
Mm.
And so I'm picking up this book and I'm reading it for the first time. And so I'm one who when I get going, I am flying through books, especially if I already know the characters.
Mm.
So whenever I'm reading a Legends novel, I am just like tearing through it because so many of those are Luke, Leia, Han,
Yeah.
their kid. Like they're really revolving around the same cast.
Yeah.
They don't stop going to the well until it runs dry. Um, and that sounds like I'm being negative. My goal is to read all of Legends at some point.
Same.
I'm more than halfway there. Um, so I picked this up and I'm taking the first bit slow. Like, let's slow down, let's pay attention, let's say these names out loud in my head so that um, I'm not just seeing them as a shape on the page, but like I'm like, okay, this is this person. Okay, that's the captain of this. I don't know what ship this is. There's families on this ship. What's going on? And we get to the end of the chapter, and there's the dramatic first, there's something wrong, Captain, and what's going on? And I'm like, okay, is this where a Jedi comes in and saves it? Like, what's going to happen here? And the entire ship explodes, and everybody dies. And I was like,
Oh.
wait, these, these weren't main characters? I could have torn through that in 15 minutes, but I just spent like 45 like trying to make sure I was feeling out and that's what like so much of that first book felt like
Mm.
of who's going to live, who's going to die, who's important, who's not. And then,
Mm.
we'd meet characters in the comics and I would, get the first issue and read it. And then I Google that name real quick. And did they appear? Oh, yeah, they were in Light of the Jedi. I didn't even notice them as a background character. And just how well they wove things together. But
Yeah.
that first book, Light of the Jedi, was just it was a hard read in a lot
Yeah.
of ways
Yeah.
because get so many characters that mattered, but also so many characters that you thought mattered that
Yeah.
I mean they do, but they didn't appear later
Yeah.
because the Nile were there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a common criticism among fans, even fans of the High Republic, that like Light of the Jedi has just too much going on and too many people. But like how else were they gonna start it? You know, it's like
It's exactly what it had to be.
yeah, the hardest thing I think about this book was all of the characters you have to introduce before you can move forward, because you have to not only establish, you know, the main players that you're going to be following through at least the main books, the main not the main books, the adult books. Um Probably the
You
books
of
that
all
most people
people
have read.
calling the adult books the main books. Come
It's I didn't mean to. It's hard because the reality is probably even a lot of people who are listening to this have only read the adult novels, and it breaks my heart.
I love you, dear listeners, but you're wrong. And
Um,
it's not us who suffers, it's you. You're missing so much.
you are
Oh,
missing so
it's
much.
just beautiful.
Ugh, and like it's hard. It's really hard to try to convince people to read, you know, YA and middle grade, because it's like, oh, they're for kids. And I'm like, yeah, but like you don't understand. Like that's the target audience. But as an adult, I have cried reading these books. Like you don't get it until you get it, you know. And you know, you're not going to convince everyone, and it's fine. But you know, not only does this first book have to introduce like the main character is going to be following, but it has to introduce side characters. It has to introduce characters that you're going to fall in love with, and then they're immediately going to be gone, because of course that's what they're going to do. This is when we first learned and should have known that this is never going to stop. They're going to keep making us fall in love with these characters, and they're going to take them away from us, or act like they're going to take them away from us, but actually not. Um, or in some instances take them away from us, bring them back, and then rip them away from us again.
Mm.
It's hard. And like I reread this book, Light of the Jedi, was it last year or the year before? And like even I, having read all the High Republic that had come out since then, was like, this is a lot. I need to slow down and really take it in. Because yeah, there's just so much like because you have to, along with all that, just do all this world building of like, oh, you know what Star Wars is, but you don't know what the High Republic is. So here we're gonna lay it all out for you. These are the Jedi, these are the ships that they fly, all these things. And I'll never forget, I don't remember if it was Light of the Jedi specifically or just Star Wars was trending on Twitter the day that the book came out. And I'd never seen that before with a Star Wars book. And it was that moment of like, oh, maybe this is going to be, you know, this was back when Twitter mattered, by the way. Um, uh, had that thought of like, oh, this is might be something big. Um, Little did we know that
Little did we know.
it's like 5 years and all this pain, you know, but along with the pain, plenty of good things. You know, we'll see how we feel when it all ends. Uh,
It has me thinking of if you've ever been to AMC movie theaters and they
mhm.
have that cheesy little thing at the beginning where they're
Yeah.
like, you know, the bright lights and come and see a movie. And then, here it feels like tears can be good. And like it's so corny the way it's delivered, but it's so true. And it's very much true for the High Republic. It's they hit you emotionally, but never without a reason.
Yeah.
Never without the story needing it.
Yeah.
It's not just trashing characters for shock value.
Yeah.
There's whether it's a noble sacrifice or even just something random happens and suddenly a character is gone,
Yeah.
but it's setting the stage for what this story is overall.
Right. And I think what it really tries to show us and does a very good job of doing it is like anytime there is a death, there's always someone, at least one person left behind to go on. Um, Despite that person not being there anymore. And like that's important for the Jedi. It's important for, you know, whatever side character, whatever character you want to follow or choose, because there's plenty of them. Every every time a tragedy happens in the High Republic, which it does happen quite often, big or small, it matters. You know, those people are not forgotten. And it drives the story forward every time because someone has to kind of see that and be like, we can't let this keep happening. Um, which is hard. It's hard for them and it's hard for us to be like, this feels like a lot, but like imagine being there. No thanks.
Yeah. Um, when I read this, I was, maybe talking a little trash there to anybody who hasn't read the young adult or the middle grade. But when I read this, I was looking at this going, okay, what am I going to do next? Okay, this is the first of something, but, am I interested in other things? And everything I read online was what I hear you saying on the podcast all the time, what I've been, saying to you, but it's a podcast and you don't hear me until today. Again, thank you for having me.
Yes.
Um, is you should, there's so much there.
Mhm.
So I started with the young adult, Into the Dark by Claudia Gray. And to anyone who has asked me, which is limited because of my personal life, I don't know as many Star Wars fans as I would like. The only difference between the young adult and the adult High Republic novels is the age of the protagonist.
Yep.
The writing is absolutely the same,
Mhm.
but it might give someone reading it a better ability to relate to that main character. There might be a teenager reading it that finds themselves a little bit more in Reith Silas than they would in Elzar Mann.
Right. Exactly.
The middle grade, okay, yes, that's a different type of writing.
Mhm.
But if you look at it more like a different genre than you do just, oh yeah, that's, the scaled down version. I'm thinking of like the great illustrated classics.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
they would take like old literature and like turn it into like middle grade novels.
Yeah.
Um, I'm just wow, I'm like visually seeing that now. In my fourth
Yeah.
grade classroom, we had a bunch of them. That's how I read Treasure Island. I've
Yeah.
probably not read the real one ever, but I know what that story is. I can relate to it if somebody brings it up, in conversation. And that's kind of what the middle grade High Republic novels felt like, was an entry point so you can understand what's going on for a younger reader, but for someone who is reading everything, again, it falls into that what Star Wars is. If it's a folk tale, if it's a story that has a lot of meaning for us, whether it's written as an adult novel, quote unquote, or middle grade, it's still going to have the core of a myth, of a fairy tale,
Yeah.
of a fable, of whatever word you want to use for that. It's just a little more simple in layout, but there's still a lot of depth to those characters.
Yeah. It's still as emotional. It's still as um it still makes you think. There's some stuff that's happened in the middle grade books where I'm like, this almost hit me harder than something that happened in a book that was written for my age demographic, you know? And it's um yeah, sometimes it's just presented in a different way, but all of these characters in their own way are still experiencing the same events. These things are still happening all across the galaxy, and that these characters are still being impacted by that. They might just be at a different place or doing something different or have a different role. And I think that's just been so interesting because when we first heard that the High Republic was going to be this multimedia type thing where it was going to be books and comics and not just adult novels, but also um, these other books for younger readers or whatever you want to call them. Just to quickly summarize, and I was kind of like, oh, I wonder how that's going to work. Because I'm a huge fan of YA and even middle grade, and what we'd gotten of those in Star Wars before that were pretty good. And I was like, I wonder like how that's going to translate into different authors writing in the same series, and it works so well, especially in these first three. I think these first three are like, because in each one you kind of are establishing here are these characters, and basically here's how they're reacting to this huge disaster that's happening or just happened. um and it's such a beautiful introduction to everything that happens after that, because you really have to understand, when you start reading these books, like the galaxy is, as much as it can be at peace until this point. Nothing like this has ever happened. Um, and everything changes for the Jedi and for really everyone when the great disaster does happen. And so many characters haven't recovered from it. It's tragic.
For me, when I was reading A Test of Courage,
Mm.
that's where we meet Vernestra
Yeah.
for the first time. Love her so much. But
Yes.
Imri is her Padawan. Um, well, not her Padawan yet at the beginning of this book.
Mm-hmm.
And his main issue that he's trying to I'm sorry, my dog was just trying to get into the room. um, Imri's main thing that he was trying to work through was empathy,
Mm.
was being overwhelmed by the emotions of others.
Mm.
And like that probably really resonates for some 11-year-olds.
Yeah.
Like me trying to figure out what emotions are and how to handle them at 11. I wish I had this book. That would have been a great character to connect to.
Yeah.
Who, it's through the lens of the force and he's trying to figure out, but a lot of it is just mindfulness and meditation. And
Mm.
like, yeah, it took me till my 20s to figure out that I kind of need that stuff. Like, again, I'm reading this going, I loved Imre as a character. He's
Mm-hmm.
just, it caught me right away. Um, in this almost hilarious situation they find themselves in. They're like lost on this jungle planet with acid rain. Oh wow. I really, again, I couldn't reread all three books before we
Right.
we did this, but you've got this like almost comical situation they're stuck in,
Yeah.
but they're going through so much.
Yeah.
And you're just seeing that depth in again, a simple story that you're seeing depth in. Like I think that's the repeating motif of every High Republic book
Yeah.
is there's going to be depth of character. The characters are going to connect to each other. They're going to fight each other, love each other, hate each other, all depending on who the characters are. But like, no matter what character you latch onto, there's going to be so much richness for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I've had so many moments throughout the High Republic, particularly when reading the middle grade books, which are some of my favorite books that the High Republic has put out, just in general. Um, I've had so many moments where I'm like, I wish this book existed when I was a kid first discovering Star Wars books. Um, because I didn't have that then, and a lot of us didn't. And I just think like I feel like I would have understood myself in the world so much better. But kids have these now, and I hope that parents are like encouraging their kids to like read Star Wars books that are made specifically for them in mind, because I think that would be a really good thing for everyone.
I mean, I'm planning on doing that with my kid, but again, she's
Yes.
only 2. So
Not reading quite
she
yet.
does love Nubs from Young Jedi
Yes.
Adventures.
Yes.
Um, I got her a little stuffed animal version of Nubs,
Oh,
and she knows where it is at all times. And anytime I can say Nubs, and she goes running off into the other room and comes back with our favorite little blue Jedi youngling.
oh. Star Wars really is for everyone.
Mm.
Ugh.
So we'll see if she has as much of the reading compulsion as I do as she gets older.
That's always the hope, but then you're also like, wait, I have to buy books not only for myself, but now for my kid.
Well, the youth library in my city is actually on my side of town, so
Love that.
we'll we'll utilize that for now, but I also will probably not have self-control and buy her books as well.
We like libraries. Use your library card.
Um, actually, whether or not you're using libraries in person, use the Libby app.
Yes, love Libby.
That's where I've got all of the short stories.
Oh,
all
okay.
of the Star Wars Insider. That's where I've been able to read them is through the Libby app, through my local library. I just get a
Mm,
digital copy
yeah.
of Star Wars Insider, and you get your High Republic exclusive fiction. So Phase One, Phase Two, I have the collected editions once they finally released them.
Mm,
But Phase Three, I'm actually not caught up. I've got, I think, the latest one I haven't read yet. Um, and that's been one of my favorite, where you'll find I think those characters were in Light of the Jedi.
mm,
Yes, Joss and Andrew Piken.
yeah.
Um, they were again background pilots. I think they might have had a chapter or two where they were point of view, but then they become the main characters of this little ongoing short story collection,
Yeah.
um, where you're seeing things happen. And without, again, too much spoilers for those who haven't finished phase one yet, they're centered on Starlight Beacon.
Mm,
So you've got this little slice of life snippet of this one character, but you're seeing main events happen in the background that you might have already
mm,
read in a novel, and you're getting a little bit of a different look. Um, and then weaving that together, and then with the comics, they've done such a good job. I was so concerned on if they make the comics primary, like you have to read them to understand the novels,
mm,
are
mhm,
we going to miss out on are there going to be people who won't read the novels because of that and High Republic can't be what it is
mhm.
because, they're not selling enough or whatever? They've done I mean, a fantastic job on you don't have to read them. But if you do, it's a whole nother storyline that's happening at the same time.
Yeah.
And then there are a few like if they ever release a one shot, you should probably go read that one.
Yeah.
There are a couple like right at the end of a phase where um, it's like massively important to who is Martian Rowe or what are the Echo Stones. And now I'll be quiet because that's not phase one.
It's hard. Every time we talk about the High Republic on this show, I'm like, can we talk about phase three? And we've talked about it a little bit, but it's like you just want to talk about everything. There's only one episode per week. I can only do so much.
Well, you've got a willing co-host for any and all High Republic episodes.
I mean, we're gonna have to
Pl-
keep talking about
pl-
the High Republic after it ends at this point to get,
oh, I
yeah,
mean, we have what, 3 months left?
yeah, not
It,
enough.
hmm. So yeah, and then we'll have to stop crying long enough to start recording again.
Oh, I'm gonna have to record like some kind of like raw reaction when I finish the book and just not post it until more people have read it because like I know I'm gonna have feelings and I don't cry when I read books like super often, but the High Republic has gotten me a few times and if that's happened already, I have a feeling that if any book is gonna get you, it's gonna be this last one coming out in June.
When Charles Soule posted, I want to say back in the fall sometime, it was a picture of a physical manuscript he had printed out of like the first his first draft. Like my stomach actually clenched up. I was like, wait, first of all, we can't be that close to the finish line. And then I'm realizing it was less than a year at that point. But I've also I gotta say, again, Light of the Jedi is what we've talked about so much. That was my entry point to Charles Soule.
Mm. Yeah,
And if
same.
you're not on his newsletter, get on there because he releases it monthly, quote ish, heavy air quotes. When he releases it, there's times where there's some exclusive merch where he's like, I have an extra 15 copies of this and I signed them all.
Oh.
Go try to buy them on my website. So I never got anything that exclusive, but I did get a signed bookplate.
Oh,
So
yes.
because again, this came out, cons weren't really happening yet.
Hmm.
We were still in lockdown for most of us, most of the world. So he just printed off the little title card, Star Wars High Republic Light of the Jedi, and signed them all. So I have one, it says, We are all the Republic with a great cross guard lightsaber drawn in Sharpie in his signature. I've got that on actually a shelf right next to me. I keep that one closer to my desk.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, we've talked mostly about Light of the Jedi, but like it's been longer since I've read the other two, and I who has time to reread everything? I wanted to. There was a point where I was like, I'm going to reread all of the High Republic before we get to the last book. I don't know why I thought that was possible. It's not. There's a lot of books. I mean, don't let that intimidate you because all you have to do
I
is take one at a time. But
I did manage. I did a full phase one reread after phase two ended.
mm,
So I have a habit of massively overcommitting to series. I'm been wanting to reread The Wheel of Time, all 14, 1,000 page books for a while. I'm a few books into The Expanse, and that's like 9 books of a thought. Like I tend to latch onto series, not individual books. It's a problem. Like I don't know. Help me, please. Um, but the one that I have spent far too much time on is The Cosmere by wow, right, by Brandon Sanderson.
mm.
And that's multiple series that he's written that are all happening in the same universe.
Oh,
And I had finished up reading a big chunk for that right as High Republic started. So I was like, great, I'll replace it with this. Well, then he started writing again, and then High Republic started going, and suddenly I'm like, I can't keep up.
no.
And I managed to have just enough of a break between, he released a book and I read it, and I wasn't starting anything else of his yet. And then I managed to finish phase two, and I had this beautiful window where, yes, I managed that phase one reread, and I don't think I'll ever get that lucky again.
Do you also feel as though you will never get to read all the books that you want to in your lifetime? Because I think and worry about that constantly. There's too many books. There's too many books, and also they keep writing and publishing more. So it's like you finish the pile that you wanted to read, and you're like, okay, I can go read other things. And then there's new books, and it keeps happening. Every week there's new books. It's
I
never going to stop.
also I love a reread because I love finding more depth on the second time through.
Hmm.
And then I'll have read so much that by the time somebody puts out book, again, Brandon Sanderson just put out book 5 of the Stormlight Archive. They're like 1,500 pages each.
Yeah.
I had to reread the first 4 because, yes, I know the characters' names, but I'd forgot, like, where are we in the story?
Right.
So I have a problem of I'm already going through so much I already have. I need to go back through this series, and then I need to reread that series. That, yeah, I have a problem. We'll see. We'll see how long it is until it catches up to me. Spoiler, it's already caught up.
It's I mean, it's even hard in Star Wars to keep up because like most months out of the year, at least for the last, 5 years or so,
Yeah.
there's pretty much been a new book out every month. Um, and listen, I'm not complaining about that, but also that's a lot to keep up with. Um,
I still haven't read The Glass Abyss.
no.
I know. I have your 2 or 3 episodes. You might have interviewed the author. I don't remember, but they're in my podcast queue. I also have like 50 podcast episodes lined up at a time.
God.
And I just hit add to end for those kind of I need to read the book first before
Yeah.
I'll yeah. So that's once I do read it, I'll then scroll down, find them and finally listen to. I'm sure it's a wonderful interview. I can't listen to it yet. I
It's
do. Sorry, this will be me fanboying a little bit. I do love the like 5 to 10 minute spoiler free reviews that you put on release day for a
oh
lot of things. Those are fantastic because I really want to connect with something as it's coming out. But
yeah,
again, in podcast form, it's usually a discussion of the whole book.
yeah,
Like I'm not going to recommend this to anybody who isn't at least a couple books deep into the High Republic or
right.
will have at least blown some of how the original thing plays out.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I like doing them because it kind of centers me in like here's where we are in the High Republic, here's what's just happened. But also it's like I know as a listener of podcasts, like sometimes, like you said, I haven't read the book yet. The book has just come out and I want to engage with it, but I don't want spoilers and like to just have someone very quickly tell me like, hey, like this is kind of the premise. These are like the main themes. this is what I'm really gonna like, and there's gonna be more in-depth discussion later. And like they're so fun to make because it's just I just get to talk about books that I like. So I'm glad that you like them.
I'm realizing I don't even know how deep I've been watching the clock, and I haven't said the name Wreath Silas yet. I I loved Into the Dark. Again, I was on the fence of do I read the young adult or not, and so I read that one and it grabbed me. But
Mm,
a Jedi who doesn't want to be a warrior but wants to be a librarian,
yes.
I love this kid.
Yes.
He's absolutely who I would be if I was lucky enough to be born in a galaxy far, far away. And the watching that path grow of
Yes.
there is a war going on. Warriors are needed, but warriors are what we think we need. But he knows what his strengths are. Like
Yes.
his character arc has been wonderful. And it was all set up so well in that first book of this is who he is.
Yeah.
This is the Jedi Padawan who doesn't want to be a swashbuckling hero. He wants to read books and figure things out.
Yes. And not not going to spoil anything from phase 3 again, but the payoff to that in phase 3 with his character just continues to be better and better and better. Like, ugh, I want to talk about it and I won't. I
I,
won't.
I I can't even respond to what you're saying. We'll have to talk about it eventually.
We will. Because I when I first read this book and met this character, I was like, he is me. Like if I were in this position, I would also just want to read all day and not go do things. And it's so important because you start to understand, like, you know, he has these fears and these hesitations, but he knows like that's not nothing. And there are times when you're gonna have to go, be a Jedi and do certain things, but also like um to be able to hang back and play this other role sometimes and know what you're good at and lean on that and realize that people are going to need you for that. So good. And Claudia Gray just, of course, did a perfect job setting all that up because she always does. And then she
Nope.
really, really hurt us in Fallen Star, but that's okay.
Oh, yeah. That was also my intro to Claudia Gray. So Charles Soule and Claudia Gray, these were my first books for both of them.
Hmm.
So then I went and read Lost Stars and
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I fell in love. I still can't believe the masterclass she did in that book. And then she did The Fallen Star, and now I hate her with everything I have. But I love her. It was, yeah, it's so well done. Again, so much of the High Republic is that good pain.
Yes.
The heartbreak that means something that we learn something about ourselves through reading these kind of stories.
Yes. Um, Also have to give Justina Ireland credit too, because the introduction of Vernestra and all of those other characters and like the where that's set in the timeline and kind of like putting the pieces together and understanding like here's what the quote unquote like maybe like younger characters are seeing and feeling in this moment was also super well done and really got me hooked onto middle grade in Star Wars and just really in general because she really like does it so well in that way that all these authors really have keep doing, which is like you're not talking down to the younger audience. You're meeting them where they're at and giving them a really good story and giving them depth and giving them things to think about. And I think like all three of these authors and like all of the authors across the board, and I wish we could talk about more of them, um, just did such a good job. And you can tell that they spent so much time carefully putting all this together, knowing that it was going to be the absolute best that they could do. And it just turned out so well.
It's such a good job too on coordinating.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm doing this with this character. Where is he going to go? Who's
Yeah.
picking up the thread? Justina Ireland, I feel like her and Kevin Scott must have really connected
Yeah.
because there's this one, yes, but then the Race to Crest Point Tower. I'm actually looking back at my shelf to make sure. Yes, she wrote that one also. Um, that one fed into the High Republic Adventure comics that Kevin
Ooh.
Scott was penning. No, that was Daniel Jose Older, right?
Ye-
Oh no, now I'm making myself look foolish.
Yes.
I lent my copy of that to a friend, so I can't look at it on the shelf.
Um,
um, okay, well, TBD. We will have to figure that out. But her work with Ram Jamaram, I think that's how you say his name, um, was just a great intro to this character that you really latched onto. And then he pops up in the comics as like a staple there.
yeah.
And it's the exact same characterization. Like there's no like shift between different authors on his character.
Yeah.
Really, I think that's probably the case for most of the High Republic. Like they did a really good job of defining a voice for somebody, and no matter who's writing them, it feels seamless. It doesn't feel I never got whiplash that I can think
Yeah.
of a character jumping from one author to another, from a middle grade to comics to adult, young, like it felt smooth
Yeah.
transitions for the characters. It felt really like this is their story. Of
Yeah.
course, this is the next step. Of course, they're going to go and meet those other Jedi Padawans and go off on, you know, the Innovator. We've got a science vessel that Padawans are meeting up on. And wow, I think I'm in phase three in this reference. But those Padawans came from like three or four different separate stories before they came together here.
Yeah. Yeah. That is one of many things that really, really got me in the beginning. And I was like, oh, like I forgot that this author didn't originate this character. This other author wrote them first, but I'm reading this other book now that's come later, and it's the same exact character, the same everything. And I don't know what it takes behind the scenes to make that happen. It's most likely a combination of like author coordination, editing, outlining, things like that. But still, like to see that on the page and to like know like how that could not have been easy to do. And they have done it throughout the entire thing.
They did
Um,
it beyond the High Republic too, because so Into the Dark, Claudia Gray,
mhm,
most of it takes place on the Amaxine station.
mhm.
That first appeared in The Rise of Kylo Ren, the comic by Charles Soule,
Oh,
before the
okay.
High Republic came out. That station, we had that as we had visuals for what that place looked like. And it's
Huh.
appeared in other comics since. But he knew what he was gonna well, he knew what Claudia Gray was gonna use that for, and he fast forwarded centuries and said, let's have this same space station overrun by greenery. Like that's a really cool visual. Let's use it there.
Hmm.
Or in the High Republic comics, the Marvel, like the mainline comics,
Mhm.
Keeve Trennis is the main character there. I
Uh-huh.
love Keeve. I
Yes.
used her picture as my token for a D&D character the year that High Republic started. Just a fantastic character. But she is mentioned in Dooku Jedi Lost.
Ah, yes. I forgot
And it
about
is a
that.
huge spoiler if you know what that mention is.
Yes. Oh,
But
I
it's
do.
just been decided that now we all know where her story goes. Or if you don't, decide if you want to look that up or not. But that's part of the story is
Mm,
we know where she's going to end up.
yeah. But that's so
And that
Star
like
Wars, isn't it? You
Jedi
know?
Lost was how far ahead?
Oh,
Years, I think.
yeah. Yeah, it came out in was that 2019, I feel like maybe. Um there are apparently so many High Republic references in there that we didn't know were High Republic references because Kevin Scott did, but we did not, which is both upsetting and brilliant. It's fine.
I need to go re-listen. Well, I'll wait until the end of this, and then I want to go and see
Yeah,
what is in there. What did we miss?
yeah,
And
probably so
what
much.
else? That's never been a specific Google I've done. Like, where else did these end up? If you're
Yeah,
ever lucky enough, well, I'll say it this way, when you're lucky enough to have any of these authors on, I feel like that's going to be one of your leading questions is where have you put Easter eggs? Don't tell me what they are, just tell me what the stories are so we can go try to find them.
Oh, I should do that. Oh, um, yeah, because I'm sure Kevin Scott's not been the only one. Um, this discussion has happened pretty much how I expected and how all of these High Republic discussions on the show usually go, which is I try to get down to like it being as specific as possible, and then we end up spending most of the episode talking about how great this series is. But that's because it's true. That's because this we you can't talk enough about the High Republic. It's so big. There's so many different things going on. There's so many characters. There's so many different themes and events to latch onto that like to try to limit even to just like a couple books is like really really hard because you start talking about Light of the Jedi, A Test of Courage, and Into the Dark, and you spend like half the time trying not to spoil things that happen later because everything is connected. And we're not it's not even over yet. We don't even know how it's all gonna really come full circle in the end. And I'm scared but also really looking forward to it because like in a way we've been waiting for this for years and I can't believe it's been that long. Um but it has, and I think
It's
it's pretty
wild
amazing.
how long it's been.
I know.
Yeah. And I feel like the discussion of these books in particular are probably the most difficult to just focus on,
Yeah.
especially Light of the Jedi, because it is the gateway to the entire series.
Yeah.
A wave two discussion might be a little easier to focus on more specifically,
Yeah.
but how do you even start to talk about the like I'm going to use the word the cornucopia of the Light of the Jedi? Just you open the pages and everything spills out.
Yeah.
Like every character, I mean, I remember being floored when I was like reading the description of a vector for the first time. Like, okay,
Yeah.
cool, the Jedi Starfighter, and I'm picturing, um, Obi and Annie at the beginning of Revenge
Yeah.
of the Sith with that wonderful opening scene.
Yeah.
Um, I actually just built the Invisible Hand, the Lego set, and I
Nice.
and I knew I was close to the end of the build, so I watched that opening scene as I finished the build, and just I mean that's the visual you have in your head of these two Jedi Star pilots being fantastic and flying through this massive battle. Except then they go into describing the laser cannons as only functional when a lightsaber is plugged in. And you realize they're not warriors.
No.
Violence is not what this Jedi Order resorts to. It has to be an intentional step to take a lightsaber off your belt, to put it in the dashboard of the ship, to power up the cannons, and then it becomes an option. But they are going to do everything they can to be the peacemakers that they lost by the time the Clone Wars happened. Oh, I'm sad again now.
Oh, me too. Whew. It's a bit like I always say at the end of these episodes that it's been fun. And it has. It really has. But also like at the same time, anytime you talk in depth about the High Republic, it gets a little sad because like that's just I mean that's the reality. The books are trying to get across and succeeding how tragic this was that everyone who didn't ask to be pulled into this war has been forced into it, and it's this huge thing, and
Yeah.
ugh, um, we're all going to be sad when it ends, but also maybe just a little bit relieved. Maybe that we get a little bit of a break from all this sadness. I don't know, maybe not. Um, but it has been so, so, so good to be able to finally, it took us a while, but finally sit down and talk about this because you were like, can we talk about this? And I was like, absolutely, because I will never pass up a chance to talk about the High Republic, but also just Star Wars books in general with people who also love them, collect them, appreciate them, and really, really value them for what they are. So I'm really glad that you were able to join me for this.
I'm I'm so grateful that you had me on. I will never pass up the opportunity I mean, to talk about this with even friends and whoever. And um, if I'm, finding people on Instagram who are reading the books and exchanging comments and that sort of thing. But to be able to do this kind of let's just put on a mic and start rambling and talk about how much it means. Oh, this is wonderful. I am absolutely here. If you want to continue, while at the same time they won't stop putting out books, and we're all
Yes.
here just trying to keep up.
Yes. Anything you want to plug before you go? Any socials, anything?
I have a bookstagram
Yes.
that is a picture of books as I read them, mostly, and then sometimes pictures of my shelves and that sort of thing. So that is Archives of Lore. So archives underscore of underscore lore. So I can't promise I will be anywhere near as cool as Meg is on Insta, but I would still love to connect with any Now This Is Lit readers, and I'll try to get some good pictures up. I've moved shelves around. I should probably get some pictures of that. I turned the closet of this room into a little reading nook, so there's like a bench
Oh,
and some
love
lights and stuff.
that.
So I'm actually really happy with how that came out. I've got obviously some Star Wars decor in there, so I'll just put some nice pictures up to lure the audience in to my post every like week or two as I finish the book.
Yes, I will put that in the description so people can find you. I don't know if I'm following you, but I will be by the time this episode comes out because probably when I'm doing the edit and you say your handle again, I will be like, I needed to follow that account. If I'm not already, I might be. So I will do that. But
Brilliant.
everyone else should follow you too because we are big fans of Star Wars Bookstagram around here. And I think, with the way social media is at the moment, I think anywhere we can find to connect with other Star Wars readers
Yes.
online is
Yes.
super important. Um,
Yes. It very much is.
yeah. You're definitely coming back to talk about more High Republic and possibly other Star Wars book things at some point. So we will figure that out. I know where to find you.
I have the biggest smile that you can't see because it's a podcast. But yes, I am. I would love to.
Yes. All right. We will plan that. Um, yeah. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks, Meg.
Now This Is Lit is part of the Faraway Fandom Network. It is produced by Devor Mondum and written, hosted, and edited by me. Jose Jimenez designed our podcast art. You can keep up with the show on Substack and Now This Is Lit, and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. There are so many ways you can support the show, and all of those ways are linked in the show description. The newest way is to become a member of our Patreon. For $1 a month, you can get access to an exclusive show and a sticker. And if we get 500 people to support the Patreon per month, I can hire an editor. That would be great for me, and maybe for you too. So if you'd like to support the show with just $1 a month, you can do it that way. Or you can just keep listening and sharing the episodes. That is also helpful, and I appreciate it. For more book reviews and Star Wars Book Celebration, follow Star Wars Book Reviews on Instagram and TikTok.